I recently worked at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. Was there for 42 and a half years. Came there in January the 2nd, should I say 1970. Well, I found that to be a wonderful working situation. Number one, it was a situation where I could really develop a program like I wanted to develop it. They put me in charge of creating the very first debate and forensics program at that institution. And it was a marvelous opportunity because the administration really did support that particular activity. And while I had opportunity as a debate coach to travel all over the country and see all sorts of programs and even have maybe some suggestions at a time or two to look at something else, every time I kept looking at something else, I found at home was really the place that I needed to be. And one of the things that was really encouraging to me about that institution was that I could see the development of the total student. Because typically there were not high school feeder programs to develop those students. And so every student, I got to really tell them everything about debate and forensics. And so I could see the finished product when it was all over. Well, it really all started at Texas Tech University. And that was an interesting story because what happened there was I had a degree in psychology. But when I was in psychology, the advisor said, "You've got to take speech." And I said, "Oh, no, I don't need to take speech. I've been working in radio and I've been in sales and I really don't need speech." He said, "Well, if you're going to graduate from this institution, you're going to take a course in speech." Well, to be honest with you, that had to be the worst experience I think I ever had in my life. I was totally overcome by fear for my first speech. I went to the professor and I said, "I don't think I can do this." He said, "Well, David, you did really a good job." I said, "Look, professor, I don't even remember finishing the speech." He said, "Well, let's see what your peers said." And they were all very favorable. And I said, "Look, if this was this difficult, you've got to help me with this particular thing called speech. And I want to be good at it, and I want to do better." And he said, "We'll do it." And so I actually ended up with more hours in speech communication as a minor than I did in psychology. And so when I got ready to go to graduate school, just before I went to register that afternoon, the chair of the speech communication department at Texas Tech called me and said, "David, we had a faculty meeting this morning. And our faculty have recommended that I contact you to see if you might teach business and professional speech for us because we are short. Would you come and talk to me?" And I said, "Well, I'm planning on going to graduate school in psychology." And he said, "Well, I know, but would you talk to me?" So at 1 o'clock that afternoon, I left with a signed contract and became a speech major working on the master's program. And so that was the beginning of my speech career, in essence. And that's where I really became acquainted with the Texas Tech program in debate and forensics, because even though I was a teaching assistant and later a teaching associate, they also wanted me to work and travel with the debate teams, and I did that for 3 years. And so when I got ready to finish up my work, I got a lot of letters and said, "We don't know anything about this place, but they're trying to develop a debate program at Arkansas A&M College." And so I took a look at it, and that was really the beginning of the rest of the story. Yeah, I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and I grew up on a cotton farm at least through the 6th grade at Lubbock, Texas. We had a 100-acre cotton farm and 180 acres, and I really enjoyed that. And then I moved to Aurora, Colorado, and that's where I finished my high school at Aurora High, of course a suburb of Denver, Colorado. And that was really an enjoyable time there, a beautiful part of the world. My dad was really a considerate individual. That was before cotton pickers, and that's when people really had bags and they crawled through the rows and they drug a cotton bag and this sort of thing. And my dad was so kind to me that he gave me a half a sack as opposed to a full sack. And so when I was about 10 years old, I got all I wanted to know about crawling through the cotton fields. But it was interesting during that part of time because we got a month off for cotton picking every year in our school. And that's how big cotton farming was in Lubbock County. I guess I was probably about 8. And, of course, that was an enjoyable time. You know, the big trailers, and you can jump off the sides and into the cotton, and it was a wonderful time, except when you had to go and actually do the picking. I had really not thought about being a teacher at all, because ultimately I had been accepted into the PhD program at the University of Texas. I finished Texas Tech in the middle of the year. I was going to take some preliminary courses at the graduate level and then go on to Austin. But that telephone call from Dr. Harold Larson, who was the chair of the speech communication department, totally turned my life around. And I realized not too far into that particular assignment that teaching was what I really wanted to do. I really felt like that I could be able to help students to overcome the thing that was so difficult in my life overcoming and do it successfully. And so that's what I wanted to be. I think in those early years, I really looked up to the director of forensics there at Texas Tech, and that was Vernon McGuire. He had a long history of being a successful debate and forensics coach. There were some others, of course. Bill English was a name that I recall looking up to. He'd been very successful at Baylor and the University of Houston and that sort of thing. And so I looked up to those individuals as truly being the professional. His total demeanor, everything about how he worked with students, I just saw it as being a very positive thing. And so Vernon McGuire was one of my early on people to admire. Well, one of the things that I saw, I think, especially there working at Tech in their program as a forensics coach, was the success that these students were having and how it was developing them as total communicative beings. And that was very impressive to me. And I just saw some kids who came from backgrounds and everything that probably shouldn't be really achieving all the success that they were able to achieve, but through additional communication skills, they were able to make those achievements. And so that really impressed me. And I decided at that point in time that's really what I wanted to do as well. Those early years were really difficult at the University of Arkansas at Monticello in beginning the debate program because they really didn't have any history. They didn't know what it really took and this sort of thing. In fact, Dr. Claude Babin was the president of the institution. It was Arkansas A&M College. And when he hired me, he told me, he said, "David, I'm going to give you a travel budget." He said, "I'm assuming you need one of those." And I said, "Yes, sir, I really do." He said, "I'm going to give you $300. And I said, "Okay, that'll be fine." And so I'd been there a couple of months, and he came in and he said, "David, we're having some financial difficulties, and I'm going to have to cut your travel budget to $150. I cut it in half. And I said, "Well, Dr. Babin," I said, "you know, to be able to really have a successful debate program," I said, "we've got to be able to go out and compete against some additional schools." And I said, while I can do some training here in-house and we can have some intramural types of debating activities and this sort of thing, we need to really get out and see what the rest of the world is doing to be able to compete. And he said, "Well, okay, I'll increase that to $175 for this semester." So anyway, I started off with $175 for my first year there, and it was pretty difficult. But what I did was I did some home and homes. I invited some other schools. I invited Ouachita Baptist University to come down to our place, and we could debate. I told them at Henderson State University, I met a young man, and I said, we'll come to your place if we could debate on a Friday afternoon and maybe a Saturday morning. And then I got to get home because I don't think I have enough money for motel rooms. And he said, that'd be great. And so we did some home and home sorts of things to kind of start off before we ever hit really the debate circuit. But it was trying to encourage and develop the students to build their interest in this is what it's really all about and the excitement and fun that they can have from that activity. And it worked. And it worked. And after about 3 years, I was off traveling some and doing really well. And I never will forget, I was met at the office door one day by the chairman of my department, and he said, you know, David, he said, I haven't figured this out. And he hired me, and his name was Dr. David Lanphier. He said, I haven't figured this out. He said, I don't understand how come that you're so successful at this. And I said, well, David, I said, I didn't know I was supposed to fail. This is a joy to me. It's a joy to our students. And I said, they're learning, and they know what it's like to achieve now, and they want to be winners. And I said, so we're in this thing together for the long haul. And so that's really kind of how those first years really developed. It was really the early 80s, though, that we really realized what we could be. Because I always touted our team as being from the piney bayou country of southeastern Arkansas. And everyone would say, where in the world are y'all from? And I said, well, we're from a very small school. And at that time, we were only about a couple thousand. And we were competing then with a lot of the bigger schools. And my coaching philosophy was I always wanted them to be able to debate against the very best. Because my idea was that's the way you learn. In fact, I went to Southwest Missouri one time, and we got really beat up really badly. And the young ladies on the team said, you know, you fed us to the lions, and we're really upset about this. And I hate to say it, but I think they cried all the way from Missouri back to southeast Arkansas. But it was really interesting what happened on Monday afternoon. They were in the debate office, and I said, I told you all could take the day off, that we'd meet on Tuesday. And they said, no, we want to tell you something. We'll never be beaten that bad again. We're going to work. We know how to make this thing happen. And I said, I'm with you all the way. And so we had a lot of interesting successes like that. In those early 80s, I think when we finally realized we're a force that can be reckoned with, is we went down to the Strawberry Classic at Southeast Louisiana. Teams from all across the country there, and the final awards were handed out. It was the University of Arkansas at Monticello, #1, the University of Southern California, #2. The reason that I took them to that tournament to begin with, there were schools like Navy that was there, and Cornell was there, and Southern Cal was there, and LSU, and big name schools. And I told them, I said, what you need to do is observe everything that you see from these other schools. And if it's good, you emulate it. That's what you want to try to become. And I'll have to admit, in debate alone, we won overall sweepstakes. Southern Cal was a magnificent team. They had as good a debaters, I think, as I had ever seen in my life. They were just wonderful. And I told our students, that's what you want to be like. That's what you want to be like. And so they were, I think, pleased. They were excited. In fact, the trophy, we had to take the trophy, was so big that we had to take it apart so we could get it in the van to carry it home. But anyway, that was a good feeling to resurrect that when we got back to the campus. Well, I think one of the things that I'll always remember was about a class that I was told once again by an advisor that I had to take that I really didn't want to take. And that was art appreciation. Anyway, I took that particular course, and I was astonished by the instructor. I had never seen anybody so passionate and consumed by what they were teaching and the love that they had for it. And I thought to myself, this is the most amazing thing. This woman can see things that most of us would never, ever be able to see because of her desire, because of her interest, because of her love for this. How interesting is this? And every lecture she had was one that was totally invigorated. In fact, the time went so quickly in those classes, I couldn't believe they were over. And I always thought, that's what I want to be like in the classroom. And I really worked to be that way. But for me, it was really kind of easy because I said that you needed to have passion. And I really had passion for what I was teaching. Because to me, communication is so very important. I look at it this way. With everything else being equal, if we're a better communicator, we stand the better chance for success. And so, to me, to walk into a classroom and get excited about what I was doing was pretty easy, because I think, in a way, that communication had helped me become successful. And so, I was sold on what I did. And I tried to give them 50 minutes of the best information that I could possibly give them to enhance their own personal selves. Well, let me tell you what the chair of the department did in helping me develop my program. I arrived on campus there that January of 1970, and part of the schedule was argumentation and debate, 103. And I had 5 young men show up for that class. And that was my first class. They really didn't know what they were in there for. and so it was really kind of an interesting thing to help them learn what it was really all about. You know, and I think about those 5 individuals now, and they've gone on to be so successful. And I'm so appreciative of who they were, of their desire to want to learn about it. And so it was a marvelous experience, really. And then, of course, from there, and since we didn't have a lot of feeder programs, in fact, there were no speech courses in the high schools in southeast Arkansas. And so when they came to college and took speech for the very first time, those typically were where I looked for students that I could encourage to come into my program. Out of the speech courses, and they were talking about gen ed speech courses, that I would look for students that I thought might be successful or might have an activity that they would want to participate in. And so that was the way I'd really developed the program. You know, I really don't think it was difficult for them to buy into the concept of how important argumentation and debate was, because most of these young men that were in there very quickly adapted to it, and I think that they could see, wow, I'm developing in my thinking and my reasoning and my ability to communicate, and so they easily bought into the program. I didn't have a phone in my office, and this was back, remember now, we were still using manual typewriters and the old fluid duplicators and that sort of thing back during those times, and I didn't have a phone in my office, and I kept having to go to another building to get to the phone so I could talk to people and so forth. And I finally called the president of the university, and I said, I've got to have a telephone. He said, no, we don't do that for instructors. We only do that for offices and this sort of thing. And I said, but you told me we were going to develop a program. The nature of my program is I have got to be communicating with people around the country and this sort of thing. And to me, it's crucial. And so he made the exception, and I think I was probably one of the first instructors to really have a phone so that I could talk to my colleagues around the country and that sort of thing. But typically, I was responsible for everything. I was teaching 5 classes, doing the director of forensics work, and of course all the practice sessions and everything, and traveling on weekend. And so the whole ball of wax was mine, so to speak, and it continued that way really for a number of years, for a couple of decades. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was a one-man band from 1970 until 1994. I was asked to be the dean of the School of Arts and Humanities, and I kept on being the one-man show until I just ran out of time and energy, and so they said, well, you're running the show. If you need an additional person, you can hire someone. So in 1996, I hired my first debate coach while I was still director of forensics. But anyway, I was basically doing all of it at that particular time. Yeah, it was not that easy at times. I really felt like at times that maybe, and I'll have to admit, I had a very understanding wife and family who really shared me with a lot of other people. In fact, I told some students one time, I said, I think I spend more time with y'all than I do with my family. I look back on it, and I'm not ashamed of that in a way, but I wish it could have been different, but it simply wasn't. And they understood, and of course I tried to involve my children and everything as much as I could into the program, what at least I thought was reasonable. To involve them and let them be a part of it and that sort of thing. And so we did that. Well, I would invite them up to the office to keep time for debates and just to associate with the kids. And then I made it a particular point that one time each year I would take them on a trip so that they could go to a competitive event, typically outside the state of Arkansas and so forth. And when they were about 11 years old, we started that, and we did that through about age 15 with them. And so they got to travel and keep time and meet the kids and go to different colleges. And so that was a great time for them, and they loved that association. Building a culture of excellence, I think, is an interesting concept in itself. I think you, first of all, have to have a real belief. And I really believed in my students that they could be winners. And it didn't matter. In fact, the president of the institution that hired me originally, he asked me one time, he called me in and he said, "What do you think of our students?" And I was really kind of astounded by that question, to be honest with you. And I said, "They're like students anywhere. They're human beings, and they have tremendous potential to be able to learn and to become successful and this sort of thing." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm so glad to hear that." Thinking maybe that our students were something less than first class, and I really never believed that. I saw potential, I think, in every student that I had, and I knew that at times I couldn't take them maybe as far as others could go, but I could take them further than they had gone or further than they had been. And to me, that's what was really important. I wanted to be sure that they got more than what they had. And so we developed this idea of winning. And there was a lot of schools out there that we could look to. For example, Southwest Baptist, run by Dr. Derryberry. Bob was a close friend of mine. In fact, he was a teacher at Ouachita for a while, and we had those one-on-ones where we would go to each other's schools, and we'd have a little wiener roast after it was all over, but we would share competitive events and this sort of thing. And he had a marvelous run of excellence that we could look to and this sort of thing. And I told my students, I said, you always want to become the very best that you can become. There's no reason to settle for second or third when you have the potential to be the best. And I want you to work toward that. And most of my students really bought into that. It was okay if we didn't win, because growth was my real concern. But I knew that if we learned the lesson well, then we could win. They did too. In fact, I had a young girl who was from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Her name was Michelle Miller. Did not know anything about her except her principal called, her superintendent called, her business instructor called and said, she's heard about your program and she wants to come and debate. Can you offer her a scholarship? And so I talked to her on the phone. I talked to her parents, and I'd never met her, but I offered her a scholarship. It was the last tournament of her second year before she ever won an award. But she came to me after that and she said, you know, Mr. Ray, I know what it takes now to be a winner. And I will never come home without an award again. I said, really? She said, oh yeah. Oh yeah, I have watched them. I know what they're doing. I know how to do it. I'm going to be those individuals. And I said, great, let's do it, Michelle. And sure enough, she never came home without multiple awards in the next 2 years. Went on to finish law school with honors. Currently has a high position with the Secret Service in Washington, D.C. So I could see all of those things, and I nurtured and encouraged that. And why I never became upset with the girl for not winning was she was trying. And trying and working was important to me. And so I knew that sooner or later she could be a winner. And I never really let them drop out. They would become discouraged at times because they wanted to win. They wanted to bring a trophy home. They wanted to do this. And I had a number of students. In fact, I recall one today who is a provost and vice chancellor. And he came to me and said, well, that's it. I've had it. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I can't go on it for. He said, apparently I just can't win. And I said, you know, I've been watching your growth. And I said, you are so close. I said, don't give up now. Let's try it next semester, because I think that's going to be the turning point in your career. And he said, do you really think so? And I said, I think that's true. And sure enough, it was. And, you know, he rode that van and went to the 83 National Convention with us at Estes Park, Colorado, and has gone on to complete his doctorate and become very prominent in the state of Arkansas in academia. And so he was close, but he could do it. I just never gave up on students. In fact, the one thing that I can really say that I guess that I could really be proud of as a teacher, I never had a student who was not able to finish a speech. Close a time or two, I had one young lady stop right in the middle of it and said, you know, I just can't go on. I can't finish the speech. I said, you know, I'm so glad you stopped right now to pause, because I had an important question I needed to ask you. And she said, really? What was that? And I asked the question, and she responded. And I said, now, in light of that, could you just finish your speech? And she said, okay, and finished the speech. Oh, my goodness. I had one young lady who was at the door one night, and she said, I'm sorry, I can't do my speech. And I said, Marianne, her name was Marianne Smith, and she was from Marianna, Arkansas. And I said, Marianne, why can't you finish your speech? She said, I just can't do this. She said, I just can't do it. And I said, well, let me go in and start the class, and then let me come back out in the hall and talk to you for a second, okay? Would that be okay? She said, yeah. So I went and I started the class. I came out in the hall, and I said, now, you prepared a lot of visual aids and everything. Could I look at your visual aids? And she said, well, sure. And I looked at them, and I said, wow, you have worked so hard at this, and these are going to be so good to present your ideas. I said, I just think that if you walked away from here tonight and you never did the speech, that it would always be on your mind, and you'd always wonder what would have happened. I said, Marianne, you're ready. Let's go in and give the speech, and then you tell me if you don't want to do this. Well, she went in, she delivered the speech, she joined the debate team the next semester, and she and her partner won PICAP regional debate at Trinity University in San Antonio 2 years later. It was really essential in everything that we do. And I think that was one of the things that I think the students could actually see what my desire for them was, that I wanted them to be successful. That was my real goal. And not only that, but in a way, I expected it. And I hate to say this in some ways, but I really felt like that a lot of students were able to be successful because they didn't want to let me down. And I don't know, maybe that's a good thing in a way, because it made them work harder. But they knew what we had going, what we wanted to achieve. We wanted the institution to be proud of us. We wanted the department to be proud of us. We wanted their families to be proud of them. And so that expectation was really kind of built in all along. And I've always said, and I think this is one of the things that Bob Derryberry's program at Southwestern has been so good about. I think success breeds success. I think that when you can see these things and every year can know and what the expectation is, I never will forget. I watched a video that Bob had done one time about his team. And he had an alum talking to the students. And that alum simply told them, we knew every year what we were expected to do. And we met that mark. And so expectation is critical, I think, on being successful. Oh, I guess the success in my career is, not that anything that I ever achieved, but the things that made me most pleased, most happy, were the success of my students. When they won awards, just to see their faces, to see their excitement, that's really what it was all about. Wasn't about anything that I accomplished, but it was about everything that they had accomplished. That was really important to me. And I think that was probably the driving force. I guess I was always kind of an individual that was never really kind of concerned about self, because I always knew that, and that's an interesting principle in a way, if you elevate others, they in turn are going to elevate you. So in a way, I never had to worry about success. They carried me to where I am. And it was nothing I did by myself. It was them. How does it feel to be a member of the Pi Kappa Delta Hall of Fame? Well, first of all, when I got the letter, I was really kind of in disbelief. I was really kind of astonished because, be quite honest, I had been on, the National Council for years. I'd been president of the organization. I'd been all these things. And I had seen all of these, what I really thought were great professional people and their achievements. And to me, they were truly at a level that I never ever thought that I could achieve. They were people that I really revered, that I really looked up to, that I wanted to emulate in my life based upon what they had accomplished. And I was just astounded to think that somebody thought enough of me to be able to put me in that Hall of Fame. But I was so grateful. Oh, Georgia Bowman, for example, a great lady. She was tough as nails, but boy, she was so professional and so good at what she did. Larry Norton, Mr. PICAP himself, we all just admired him so very much for his easy-going, mild-mannered way, but his brilliance and what he did. He was just a person that you wanted to emulate your life after. In fact, Lois and I always said, my wife and I always said, boy, would we like to be like Mr. and Mrs. Larry Norton. They're such neat people. Gary Horn, somebody I always admired. We went through PICAP early on together. He was the president before I was president. I admired him tremendously. There was somebody on the National Council, my goodness, that there were just such great people to work with, so professional. They could have fun, but they knew what the bottom line was, and that was to get the job done. And they worked so hard at what they did, and so I remember those people so well. And of course, just to be there with in the same category as the person who started PICAP, E.R. Nichols and Shields and all of that group. Bob Derryberry, I've mentioned him before in what I've said. To be there with Bob and all that he had accomplished, to me was just, it was kind of the ultimate reward for my professional career. Yeah. Speech, debate, and forensics. What in the world is it, and how do you differentiate all of that? That's an interesting question. Of course, debate, I think, kind of sits on its own. Speech kind of sits on its own over here. And forensics is the thing that couples it all together, because you can have debate as a part of forensics, speech as a part of forensics, the total overall embodiment of competitive oral communication events. And that's the way I always looked at it. And I'm going to be honest with you, my philosophy, my undergraduate degree in speech communication was, or not my undergraduate degree, but my minor at the master's level was in oral interpretation. And so I loved the forensics concept, because my idea was great debaters are really great communicators. And that means not only are they good speakers, but they also have to be, if they really want to be really successful, good readers, which are interpreters. And so forensics is the whole ball of wax for me, so to speak, in communications. And to be honest, I never did really emphasize debate over what I would call the forensic events, but I wanted all of my debaters to be good competitors in other things as well. And I really worked on that, and I really tried to turn out students in my forensics programs who had a touch of all of it. I just see the total communication concept as being critical. I think even from a debater's point of view. Oh, sure, they need to be quick thinking, they need to be able to reason, present arguments well, but how do you really do that? I think it has to do with the expression. And I don't know, I remember two debaters. Let me talk about these two debaters. This was back during the old NDT, okay? When things went at the speed of light and everybody had 5,000 pieces of evidence, okay? And typically the first affirmative speaker got up and they spoke at the speed of light and they went card after card and they took a deep gulp of breath and went on with it and this sort of thing. The best debate team I think I ever saw was made up of two individuals. One of them was the speed reader, okay? And that second affirmative got up and said, boy, I appreciate so much what my partner just said. He gave you so much information. And now let me analyze that and put it all into the proper perspective for you so that we can really understand what he was driving at. And I thought, wow, I got all of this evidence out there. I've got it flowed and this sort of thing. Now the second guy is going to come in from a real human relations perspective and put it all together so that anybody in the audience could understand, because nobody could have followed the first guy. Okay? And so I think it really takes that whole ball of wax that we're able to do. In fact, some of the better debaters I ever saw also were really probably very good at some interpretation events. I had a debater one time who's now an attorney in Little Rock who really didn't want to do dramatic interp. But I really encouraged him to do this. He really had that motivation, that drive to really want to be successful and this sort of thing. And he got really good at this interp thing. He had a piece one time that had 12 characters in it. And he nailed them all. In fact, you know that you've arrived at a forensics tournament when everybody says, oh, you'll want to go see Gary Davis from UAM when he does his... He arrived, but he was a great debater as well. And I think a lot of his debate skills really came from his being able to totally communicate. And I'm assured of it today as an attorney. He's using all those skills. Debate has evolved over the time, and I've been able to see it for quite a long time. All the way from NDT to CETA to Parley to IPDA to whatever it may be. They all had wonderful attributes. I loved NDT, but I didn't like the speed of it because I didn't think it was very good for a normal audience. I didn't think you could take that to the town council meeting and be very well appreciated. Could you get the evidence out? Could you have done the research to really find the truth of the matter and this sort of thing? Yeah. I think that was really important. But then CETA came along, and that was the cross-examination debate style, and it slowed things up a little bit. And it allowed people to think on their feet now because they were being asked questions specifically that they had to respond to. And so that added a little bit to, I think, to the evolution of debate. And then Parley came along. And that was a kind of an interesting concept on its own as well, because it eliminated some of the research aspects, but you still had to be a knowledgeable individual to be able to express your thoughts. And so you had to be educated on the subject matter. In fact, that was good for us because while I was developing, we always seemed to do really well at impromptu speaking and extemporaneous speaking, where you could stand up and think on your own and express your ideas and this sort of thing. And so when this style of debate came along, because we didn't have a huge library, we didn't have doctoral students doing research for us, we didn't have all of these sorts of things, typically for the first 3 months of NDT every year, we were really good. And then by the time the thousands of pieces of evidence caught up to us, we weren't quite that good. But boy, when Parley and when IPDA came along, we were able to hold our own because we were developing stand-up thinker communicators. And so debate has evolved over the years, and a lot of changes. And I think that's what keeps it going. That's what makes it fresh. And there's a lot different, more venues for students to perform in. In fact, I'm not sure of all of the different venues that we'll have at the 100th year celebration for PICAP, but I know that there are a lot of them. It's no more just NDT, no more just CETA, but there's a whole gamut of different ways that students can compete, and I think that's really outstanding. I think the state of forensics is really very good. I don't think we'll ever get past this idea of needing to have people of excellence in thinking and communicating. I think it may be more crucial than it ever was. And so I think that that opportunity for students to develop in that way is still going to be there. I sometimes am worried about institutions, though, who think that that's the first thing that you can cut off the agenda. Because I don't think they've thought through the need for human development like they really should, and what an institution of higher education is really all about. And so I admire those institutions who have hung with it, who have stayed with it, who said, yeah, communication, debate, and forensics, it's important. It's developing good students. In fact, that's one of the things that I'm really appreciative of my institution at UAM about, is that they truly believe it's a good thing for the student to take them to another level where they've never been able to achieve before. And I admire that, and I appreciate that. In fact, that program, even though I'm gone, and you mentioned before that for a long, long time I was a one-man show, when I left that program after 42 and a half years, we now had a director of forensics, a debate coach, and 2 graduate assistants running the program. And I think they'll continue on. In fact, one of the things that I'm so proud about that institution, they'll be hosting the IPDA National Debate Championships on our campus in the spring of 2013. Well, from a PICAP point of view, you've always got to talk about Southwest Baptist. I mean, they've been what we call our national champions for years and years. I always admired what Bob Derryberry did there. And I think part of that was the expectation of wanting to be successful and wanting to be good communicators. And I think one of the things that, to me, that's really important is the support of alumni, to keep that tradition going, keep that support there, to keep that encouragement going year after year. I know even in my program, once we were able to get a good cadre of people who had been through the program who were willing to come back, and we also established an alumni chapter on our campus. That was so very successful because it was so meaningful to those individuals who were new to be able to see how this had elevated and taken these other peoples to points of success. And so that's why I say that I think at times it breeds success. Success breeds success. And I think that's really an important thing. Oh, we've had all sorts of schools over the years. PICAP's had wonderful schools. In fact, I'd hate to even start naming all of them. But they've had so many schools over the years who have been at the top, who've been superior rated schools at every national tournament, and you could just rely on it, that that's what was going to happen. And I think the reason that they were successful over the years is because they truly had professional educators who loved the activity, who gave more than probably they should have to make sure that they were successful at what they were doing. And, and that's been the way, I guess, all the way across the board. I mean, we've had all sorts of great debate champions over the years. I think one of the things that schools can do, too, to really encourage students, I know we had a tremendous time early on. I had the need, and I'm not sure exactly why, but I guess I love kind of British debate in a sense, but I had the British debaters on our campus a couple of times. And that was a big thing for Southeast Arkansas. They flew into Little Rock, and we made them Arkansas travelers and took them to meet the governor and did all this sort of thing, and they even got to eat catfish. Oh, that's the fish with the little whiskers? Yes, that's true. But we were always astounded at their brilliance in debate and what they stood for and how they looked and their demeanor. They were truly a class act, even when they were out supporting a little old bitty rural Arkansas school that had a basketball game. They were there with their blazers, with their gold tartans and this sort of thing, and cheering so politely. They were magnificent. And one of the things I got to do over the years was encourage our debate teams to go to the English Empire and debate at Oxford and Cambridge and St. Andrews and so forth. And they did that. And surprisingly enough, they even won while they were there. And that's a pretty astounding thing from a little piney bio school of 2,000 to be able to go and compete in a sense with the world. But that's also, I think, is a motivator to be able to people to see what you can do and what you can accomplish as a human being. And that's where I always put that. It's not where you're from, it's not where you've done, but that you're a human being. And we all have those opportunities to achieve. I'm not sure really what grasped me or what made me do it or what made my colleagues do it, but we're kind of all of that nature in a sense to be able to do that. The long hours, long days, that sort of thing, to be able to provide opportunities. And I guess that's what it was, to provide the opportunities for students. It was something that to me was very, very satisfying to be able to put a young lady on a plane to take her to the 75th Pi Kappa Delta celebration in La Crosse, Wisconsin, in 1985, knowing she'd never been on a plane before, knowing that she had never been out of the state of Arkansas before. And so there was something about that just was a driving force to me to be able to give opportunities to students where they would never be able to do those before. I had a young man, we were on our way down to San Marcos, Texas to debate, and this young man came to me and he said, Mr. Ray, when we go back home, he said, do you think that it would be too far out of the way if we drove by Dallas, Texas? And I said, Marty, why do you want to go to Dallas, Texas? He said, well, I understand they have really tall buildings there, and I've never seen anything like that. So we drove to Dallas, Texas, because that was part of the educational learning experience, is to give him something that he had never had before. And we could do it.
You opened the world for people.
Well, in a way that's really true. We jump in the van and we drive 36 hours from Monticello, Arkansas to Monmouth, New Jersey. straight shot, and I never will forget. I finally pulled in this 7 to 11 or something right outside of Washington, D.C., and I was so tired I was just about to collapse. And I asked the lady, I said, do you mind if I pull out here in the parking lot and just sleep just for a little bit? I said, the kids want to see Washington in the morning, but I said, I can't drive in there right now. I'm really too tired. She said, no, you can't park out there, but if you'll park your van as close to this window so that I can see out there so that you'll be all right. This is not such a good neighborhood. And I said, I'll do that. We did that so that next morning we could drive through Washington, D.C. as it wakes up on our way to New Jersey. And you do those things to provide those experiences for students because that's what education is really all about. You know, my program was able to take kids, and I would have never, ever imagined this. I'll tell you an interesting story. We're about 45 miles from the Mississippi River. That's where our campus was located. We're on our way to the University of Mississippi for Women, the college over there at Columbus, Mississippi. And so we had to go across the Mississippi River. And so I'm in the van, and I'm driving the van, and we come up on this big bridge, and I said, oh, here's the bridge, everybody. And I look in the rearview mirror, and there's this girl, and she's just up on the side of the van like this, looking like this. It was a quarantine station on the other side because you couldn't take any vegetables or anything into Mississippi, and so we had to stop. We got out of the van, and I said, Linda, I said, I saw your reaction to the Mississippi River. I said, what is that? And she said, I've never seen anything like that. I said, Linda, aren't you from Hampton, Arkansas? And she said, yes, sir. And I said, you've never seen the Mississippi River? And she said, no, sir. Well, you can go from there and you can imagine what we were able to do the next 4 years for that young lady. And that's what debate was, you know, and this competitive thing was really all about. It was opening up the world to students in so many avenues that they didn't have the possibility of doing in any other way. And I guess that was the driving force behind everything that I saw. I wanted to share that with them. You know, I'd been blessed. I had seen the world and this sort of thing, and I wanted to let them see what it was all about too. Oh, well, I got to tell you a van story, all right. You know how debaters are. You know, you just get off campus and they want to stop. They got to stop. They got to have something to drink. They got to go to the bathroom. They got to have something to eat. They got to have this sort of thing. Well, we'd just gotten out of town about 60 miles, and they said, man, we're starving to death. Now, this was back in the old days, okay? Our van did not have an air conditioner. Our van did not have a radio, okay? And so I said, okay, let's stop. And so I pulled up to this little drive-in, and it had a little incline. And I said, I'll get out and I'll help you. So I got out and I walked around. I opened the van door, and the van door slid off and right back out into the street, right off the tracks, okay? So we spent about the next hour and a half trying to get the van door back on the car so we could get to Texas. But anyway, a lot of cute little things like that happened over the years. I think a good debater has to be an individual of curiosity. I think they have to be a person who is able to make comparisons. I think they're an individual who can be able to see more than one side of every issue and realize that there are very few issues where there is a clean cut just this side, but there's always more than that. And so that's what I really looked for, I think, in developing students, and especially looking for students to see if they were just curious. And, you know, if a student came to my office and said, man, I heard about this thing, what do y'all do? I went, yes, let me tell you, because they were curious. They wanted to know, you know, what makes things tick? What's this all about? And that sort of thing. And so I think that's an important characteristic, really. The thing that I always looked for maybe first was just this idea of curiosity and always knowing that, yeah, there is more than one side to every issue. I look at where our students are and what they've accomplished. They're medical doctors, they're attorneys, they're successful business people, they're outstanding teachers. They're all over the gamut in what they do and successful because of that. And, I think it's good for everybody, no matter what they do. At any level, I think it's good. We even had a few go on to be pretty good preachers. To me, that's one of the great rewards, is to be able to be in touch with those students. In fact, I'll have to tell you about a surprise. My daughter had come down because the school was going to honor me with a reception upon my retirement. And my daughter came down and everything, and she said, "Dad," she said, "oh, I had such memories of the debate team and all the stuff on the wall and the trophies and everything." And she said, "Before I go back home," she said, will you take me over to that building and show me that building?" And I said, "Yeah, when do you want to do that?" And she said, "Well, could we do it in the morning?" Because she said, we're going to pack up right after the reception and get ready to go. And I said, "Oh, sure, not a problem." So she appeared about 10 o'clock, and you know how naive I am, and I guess that's got me as far as I am, my naivety. But I said, "Oh, do you still want to go over to the..." "Yeah." She said, "Could we just go over there and let me run through there right quick and just see what's going on?" So I go over to the building, and I said, "By the way, Heather," I said, "I hate to say this, but I said, I don't think anybody's going to be here today because, it's Friday afternoon." And she said, "Oh, that'll be okay." Well, I got in the building, and I thought, I hear people. I thought, who in the world could be in this building? We're the only people here, because it was summer. And what we did typically, we had Friday classes were limited. We had 4-day classes, and anything on Friday was an extra class day. Well, I thought, well, who in the world? Anyway, so I get up there, open the door. There the debaters are. Years and years of them. So, pretty exciting. A pretty fun couple of hours with just them without having to go to the reception with all the rest of the people, but reliving all those special moments and seeing a lot of them. It was touching, it was special, it was rewarding and exciting to see the successes that they've had, and they wanted to come back and share and that sort of thing. Oh, there was about 20 debaters who had gathered that morning for that. And then a bunch of the current debaters that were there in summer, they wanted to come and join in on it. So we had a good party before it was all over, before we got to the reception that afternoon. Yeah. Oh, I got to tell you, you've just asked the question, what's the funniest thing that ever happened? I never will forget it. Would like to not ever remembered it, would like to remember that it never happened, all those sorts of things. But I had some really wild and crazy kids on a team at one time, and we'd gone over to Columbus, Mississippi to debate over there. And back during the old days, debate's gotten a little more casual now. Everything has gotten a little more casual, and even we used to have pie cap banquets at national conventions, and we wore tuxedos and things. And back during the early days, all debaters, we were suited. All my team was suited. Young ladies dressed nicely, nothing casual. We were ready for business. We get back to the motel, and this one student of mine told this other kid, he says, "Hey, I'll bet you $10 you won't jump in the pool." He's carrying our catalog case full of first-line debate evidence, and this was back during the old days, like so. He makes a running dive for the swimming pool at the Holiday Inn there. Suit, shoes, evidence cards, the whole thing. Well, you have to admit it was pretty doggone funny, but the team spent most of the night separating and drying thousands of evidence cards so we could debate the next morning. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my goodness, that's right.
Oh, I think the fondest memory was one of the things that National Council really worked hard on, all of PICAP worked hard on, was the 75th Diamond Celebration of PICAP in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It was really a special event, and everyone worked so hard. In fact, I was the very first president-elect of Pi Kappa Delta. That was put into the Constitution in 1985, and I was the first president-elect. And so while that was going to be Gary Horn's convention, I was the president-elect, and that's where I would give my speech and this sort of thing. So I thought, wow, what could I do to really make this special? 75th Diamond Celebration. Now, what a lot of people don't know, that the only place in the United States where that you can get real diamonds is Arkansas. So we put together Arkansas diamonds, not real diamonds, but the state tourism department has what they call Arkansas diamonds, okay? And so I went to the Capitol and I said, look, this is what we're getting ready to do in Wisconsin, and I'd like about 1,000 individual Arkansas diamonds to be able to put on every plate at our banquet in Wisconsin. They said, oh, I don't know, we don't think we can do anything like 1,000. We never had anybody ask more than about 25. And I said, no, I'm going to need 1,000 of those. Anyway, we pulled it off, and that was such a wonderful celebration. The people looked great, and that was still a moment in time when the young ladies, when they went to the banquet, wore formals. All the National Council had tuxedos. Everything was so beautiful and so nice. It was just an exciting event. It was something that I was really proud to be able to take the kids from the Piney Bayou country all the way to see what something is really like that's really nice, and it was really nice. Oh, I think what makes it such a special organization is that it really supports quality. I've always felt like that. It encourages quality in everything that it does. In fact, this idea of being able to elevate yourself to the next step, the concept that it was really developed by, to be able to move from proficiency all the way through highest distinction or whatever that level is now, has always been encouraging. And so I think that and the people that it seems to draw in, totally dedicated professional individuals, hardworking, self-sacrificing individuals. You know, I don't think I ever worked with a better group of people. You know, they could be brothers and sisters. They were just good people in every respect. And the thing that was interesting about all of them was they respected you for who you were. And I respected them for who they were and appreciated them for that. And so PICAP has always been really a special place. I think it was designed with the idea in mind that it was going to be something special. And I think the 100 years of success has proven that. You know, I think the future is good for PICAP. And the reason I say that is because all the years that I was involved in PICAP, and in fact, this is my 40th year of being a member of PICAP. I was on the National Council for about 21 of those 40 years. And the thing that was always so good about that is that they were always willing to adapt and change to the needs of the educational scene. Whatever it was, if there was something new, they would be able to pick it up and involve the students in it and this sort of thing. And so I think that they will continue to be successful because they're not just that one way is the right way, but they've followed a lot of different avenues to success. And I think they've incorporated a lot of events that have been so important to students because there's not one student and one mold. But a lot of students have a lot of different desires and needs that they want to fulfill. And I think that PICAP has given them that opportunity. And so I think because of its willingness to change, it's going to have a bright future. You know, you asked me a little bit about, kind of about my philosophy. And I got really an interesting quote that I have kind of lived by, that I think that's really important. And you asked me about the importance of debate. What really makes it important? And the quote by Aristotle always drove that home to me, better than anything else or any other pronouncement to me. And Aristotle said this. He says, if it is a disgrace to a man when he cannot defend himself in a bodily way, would it be odd not to think him more disgraced when he cannot defend himself with reason? Reason is more distinctive of man than bodily effort. And that's the thing that I think has really kind of driven me all of this time to think that it's the human mind that we're really developing. And that should be at the forefront of everything that moves us and motivates us, is to help develop better thinkers. And I think debate does that. And I think Pi Kappa Delta supports that and encourages that.